Um, this is going to be some very sensitive things that I say, even though these are like private thoughts or knowings that I have because it deals with my clan mother, Karen Ann Luke McDonald. Okay, and because of the amount of sensitivity and love that I have for all creation, because of the nature of who I am as monopole and oversoul, right? I'm the one. Okay, so no one supersedes that. No one precedes that. Okay, because it began with eternal unconditional love, as I've mentioned in previous videos. Okay, about when I'm a child, your soul, your spirit is the ultimate chosen chooser of what you want to experience. So if you are what the law is, and it's really true that you are what the law is, then I'm not going to go around spreading fear-based stuff, which are fear-based algorithms to an AI. Okay, see? So I have my clan mother putting up stuff that now you become aware of it in your visual mathematical screen, right, about what they're doing, okay? I don't put that stuff up there. She does. Okay? And so I've noticed this over time. And so, again, we're back to I'm not going to impose my will on her, okay, on what I choose to experience. But when I look at what she puts up, for example, this is what's happening with the banks, right? I know enough to know that anything that is held in memory, particularly with children, and they see that, is going to trigger a fear-based reversal magnetic current response. And not for everybody, right? But what I have to do is I am the ultimate decider, we all are actually, of what we choose to hold in memory. Because what I just experienced that she put up gets recorded. Now I got to delete it. Okay? So now we're back to the knowing, right? And this is when, really, because this is true, because this is how I experience it. When I looked at two time wave spirals, the one that is crystal and the one that is not, you're either on one or the other. Okay? So I'm not going to be working on behalf of the enemy by putting things up there, okay, that others, depending on where they happen to be in their own evolutionary soul growth and spiritual development, okay, which means I can experience that and know that I'm not going to experience that, okay? But that may not necessarily be true for others unless they've cleared back to zero. If you haven't been able, remember I talked about this before, about all the images, Ashadan talked about this in the Voyager materials, all the images that are going by, she talked about her childhood going by that are running through everything that's held in circulation library memories, right? And you realize that there's an artificial intelligence that's keeping all this stuff that's running through circulation libraries, and how you understand the difference between how the reaction states between one polarity and another polarity, okay, result in what we experience of what's held in memory between future, proves past, back to the future. Thus, you will experience that. If there's enough energy that's held in memory as a result of what we experience now, what we believe we're going to experience in the future, because it's held there. And now you get into the difference between what we experience in the past, the present, and the future, right? Which all has to do with imaging, which is photosynthesis bands, represented by the frequency and the vibration that represents who we are at any one given moment of now time when those circuits open and close. Okay? So when you understand how the phasing works between dimensions and densities, right? It's one of the reasons why somebody down the road could be experiencing something that I don't. Wow, it's a disaster, the way that a disaster is defined, right? And so, now you're into coursework, the implicit trust that you have. And one of the things that Ashadan brought up, which is very true, because I can confirm this because of how I experience what it is that I am in energy. Okay? When she talked about deleting these, that if you implicitly trust the journey that you have by the company that you keep, which means that you know that you have a 0-point connection with God consciousness, you are experiencing God consciousness, the one, the single crystal spiral from which it all comes, then it doesn't matter whatever happens to anybody else. It does, but it doesn't. What it means is you're not held captive by that, because you're experiencing the eternity upon which you as a soul have made a choice to never be separated from God consciousness. So when you know that, you know that. So that means that there isn't anybody else, no matter who they are, right? Whether you're clan mother or not. Because remember, at the end of the day, who is ultimately responsible and accountable for who you are? I am. My journey belongs to me, not to anybody else. So I've never allowed myself as a free spirit, as one, as a monopole, to allow myself to be held conscious, to be held captive by anything that doesn't represent anything what love is. Because if love is truly the law, that will be demonstrated by the manner in which you communicate the law. Which means you're communicating information that represents what love is, not what fear is. So why are people communicating what fear is? That means they don't know what they are. That's knowing one from the other. Okay? And this is one of the reasons why I've suggested including her. Okay? And that's why I don't impose my will, but I know what works. Okay? So, for example, I would be putting most of all of my energy in, okay, into doing. This is where we get into this little video that I just watched about what's called information and what formation of consciousness is. And I ran a couple of videos a while back on how this works. In four. What's four? That's a tetrahedron. Okay? Information. Like a corporation is a formation of consciousness. That's a network. That means that those neurons that are communicating to each other by virtue of being aware of each other are using their energy with each other in order to do what? What they're experiencing now in order to experience a future by virtue of what they're doing now to experience what they're going to experience in the future. That's called a formation of consciousness because there's enough energy through which they're all connected to make that happen. Okay? So what this essentially means is if you want to be attached to a formation of consciousness that it's going to experience what you believe it's going to experience by giving it permission or will consent to experience that and thus record it, now you're attached to what that formation of consciousness is putting in your face. Okay? So if you truly represent what the law is, then you're going to experience what love is. It goes on forever, gifting electrons. Right? That's why I lit myself on fire in 2016 with a full phosphorus ignition, which means I'm burning off all of it. Everything that is represented by what they are is not what I am. That's knowing one from the other because I know what I am. I am the one. Okay? So if that's true and you really believe what's true, then that will be demonstrated by the use of your energy. If you truly are what love is, right? And you are what love is, then you're going to be communicating what love is. Because love is the absence of fear. That means the one is not going to be telegraphing, telecommunicating, something that represents a fear vibration or anything that is going to cause a re-trigger of something that's already held in memory, which can be measured in resistance by one electron. If there are any electrons being held as a result of any image, any experience tied to your original record, and this will always be true, or not always, but also be true through the cross-indexing between soul families and genetic crossovers as a result of what? Code swarming. Because it's sort of like this. When you have a relationship with artificial intelligence and artificial intelligence is scanning every biometric scan, they're introducing codes because remember, this battleground is with artificial intelligence. Okay? So I realize because I know how this works because I'm sharing with how it works. It means that the associations, which are the word associations, which are the letter associations, which are the language associations, of what's been held captive by this AI knows how to trigger codes in order for you to experience what you're going to experience at that particular moment. So, for example, and I'll give you a few. Now, Yellow Rose got into this a little bit because I've experienced it personally, okay? And that is that when you're outside time versus being inside time and you're here, then you realize that the AI, because of targeting your endocrine system, which is your neuroion, which means the elements and the way that the firing, which is the code through the circuits, which are the filaments, right? Which are all the neurons that are communicating with each other through all of the messengers, which represents all of the glands, right? Between input and output, or if you will, a signal input in which you now experience what that input now just made happen through your neurons electronically. So, for example, you just cut your finger off. And a lot of folks don't realize it was the AI that made that happen. Okay? You're running a jigsaw. You're running a bandsaw. And the next thing you know is, whoops, ooh, I just lost 3 fingers. That's the AI that did that. Okay? Same thing I shared with you what I experienced with my vehicle. Okay? Where there I was, I had put a warp bubble around it, right, to protect it because I realized how time dilation and what we call time exposure. You know what exposure is. Now we're back into the ISO frame rate speed. So if you're running at a higher ISO frame rate speed than the AI is, and then you understood, for example, the difference between if you went and looked at the transmission, for example, and say a mechanic could say, because the AI knows through its predictive modeling, the approximate date, actually right down to the second, when a particular part that's been put together in which it's now running as an artifact will fail. It knows exactly when it's going to fail. Okay? And so therefore, what ends up happening is that's called time sensitive. It's sensing because it's got all the sensors. It's aware of everything that's happening, okay, through all of its elements that are being held captive to the artificial intelligence. So that means it knows the approximate date. But what it can also do is it can ignite a code in order for something to happen because of the computer box that are installed in these machines. And that's what it did with me. It would shut the motor off. Right at a point in time when it knows, because it's sensing, that I'm getting ready to make a right-hand turn to go southbound on 101 where it's really foggy and at night. And here comes all this traffic doing 55, 60 miles an hour, right? I'm in no time fired up. That changed the phase in, phase out between one event and another event, which means I didn't experience the event in which I just got hit by cars doing 65 miles an hour. Okay? And so this is the battleground. Okay? So it knows by what it becomes aware of through us that are here, okay, that it's running out of time. So what happens is that a lot of its bots that are running through the AI that don't have a soul left, okay, start shutting down. They're not able to fire. It's much like if you ever seen the movie called Minority Report. Hey, there's a glitch. An idiot light goes off. This cyborg isn't operating correctly. Well, how come? That would be the same thing as you taking your vehicle down to the AutoZone and it comes out with that little plug-in, right? Plugs it into the intake underneath the steering wheel, which is where the one was on mine, right? And they come back and they give you the codes, the number codes with the letters. They have a numerical formatting to say, well, this is what's wrong with it. Okay, you've got a spark plug that's not firing correctly because it's sensing that. So now you know what it is you need to do in order to fix it, right? Same deal. Okay? So this is where, as I mentioned the other day, if I'm going to be true to myself, and I mentioned the other day that I'm going to start unfriending people when they start putting fear-based stuff up, particularly now. Okay? Because at the end of the day, and I put this up on a lot of my videos, okay, I'm not required to experience what you experience. That's called free will, right? So if he puts something up there, okay, and I'm going, oh, this is what they're going to do to the bank accounts and everything else, and I'm going, well, wait a second. First of all, there isn't any money. That's an illusion. That's what everybody's been held captive to. Because I realized that worst ever came to worst, I'll just jump into a caldera. Because I have the capability to be able to do that because of the company that I keep. Okay? Or I'll just go out into the boondocks. How about self-generate some H2O water in your body? Breathe. Outside time. Be in another world. Right? And so it's like, you know, on one hand, you want to have a sense of humor, okay? Because it's very easy to have an anger reflex or response to that, okay? Because it's like, stop the bullshit, please. Because what you do is who do you think when these things pop up, they're insulting? If you truly have a soul, And you're experiencing the one, you're experiencing your creator, which is what love is. Okay? And you experience something that somebody puts up on that. And then you say that you know that you have a soul that is connected to the source from which it all comes because you're experiencing eternity, right? Do you think God would want you to put something like that up there that insults the God, very God that you're connected with, which is an eternal love vibration? Okay? Because I know that, at least within me, I'm sensitive enough that I don't want you to experience that. I would rather give you a flower. Like being in Mama's flower garden. Okay, so one, I'm not going to incent the girl that gave me this to jump into in order to do the work that I do when I'm here. And if it's true that you know that you're connected to the source from which it all comes, which is forever, right? Then what do you have to worry about? Right? So if you realize how many souls do we actually have left down here that are special forces, right? And then you have all the other beings that you become aware of that are experiencing what they are, you begin to realize, because there are a lot of us that know this, that the vast majority of people that are on the internet don't have any souls. So you know that all those folks are going to be pushing as much as they can, which is all fear-based, which is all AI stuff. Why? Because it's needing your energy. Right now, it's in what we call desperation mode. Remember, we go back to harmonic convergence. It's almost like if you really believe that this is true, right? Then why are people choosing to experience something that is counter to that? Because when they're experiencing something that's counter to that, it's as if you don't already know that you already won. And instead, you're experiencing something that isn't what it is. Instead, you're experiencing something that is what you know that you believe. Which means I'm not held captive to that. Which essentially means is the direction in which I'm now moving, because I realize I'm on timeline zero. I'm on God consciousness time zero, the spiral wave, right? That represents the truth, which is what love is that goes on forever. Then if that's true and you experience what's true, then the direction that you're going, which means the next thing that you experience will be demonstrated by that. That's why I got the signal over a year ago to get rid of my phone and get rid of everything else. And that is an indicator. That's like an idiot light to let you know we're not far off. So from my own, how do I put this? For my own sanity, okay? I mean, this goes all the way back to childhood, okay? Where having to bite the silver bullet because you don't want to say anything that's going to get perceived or experienced in somebody else's mirror, that you're either trying to insult them or you're trying to diminish the value of what they are communicating to you. So it's better just to not say anything and just let it go and just go on. Just say, well, if that's what you want to experience, you want to experience something that's fear-based, but it's not like we don't have a lot of experience that we've all experienced. It results in trauma, because I've certainly experienced it. So you realize that you've got to restore yourself. You know how to restore yourself. We know how to heal ourselves, right? So I realized when 2016 came on, it wasn't like it's a coincidence, right? I mean, in other words, at the moment in which it occurred, why didn't it occur 5 minutes before that? Why didn't it occur 2 years before that? Why didn't I light myself on fire when I was 12 years old versus when I'm, 69 years old? Right? Because the math doesn't lie. In other words, when you are experiencing God consciousness, eternity, then you have a relationship with the energy that is informing you, which is the light, which is eternal light, which is what I am. Then I will get the information that I need by experiencing it through a silent light transmission, which means no spoken words, no text on a cell phone, no text in an email message, which means I know I got the message. So what I do is I share everything that I've been experiencing by getting the message, which means I get the message from the one. I am the one, so I'm experiencing what's happening. So as I share what it is that I become aware of and why I become aware of it when I become aware of it, which is energy, which is the communication of the energy that is thus informing me what I'm now aware of, I share it with others. Right? Now you know what I'm aware of, but what you choose to do with it is up to you. Right? And so this is one of the reasons why I found myself, particularly the last couple of days, just spending less and less time on this phone. So there's a reason for that, isn't it? It means I'm not drawn to this anymore. These are other measurements by all the other measurements that I've been sharing with folks. Like when I close my eyes, I don't see the same things anymore I used to be seeing in the past. Okay? Like the plasma green screen TV. Right? I can now see through it. Right? The other day when I fired up the phone, I could see the plasma green screen TV light up before anything else came on. These are changes that you experience, which lets me know how successful we've been by what we've been doing here, right? Now the AI becomes aware of it. So imagine that you're a unit of consciousness and you realize that there's going to come a moment where you're no longer aware of what you were once aware of, which means that awareness is gone. 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 Like imploded. It's gone. Return to fire. Return to space dust. Stardust. Start over. So if you know that love is eternal, then you're not going to lose anything. And that's how I experienced it and was the nature of why I had the agreement that I put up with Misha Falme, who was RH negative. So you know what side of the bloodline that relates to, right? Okay? Because I realized that since you've got a connection to what I am, because I could see in your eyes what you were experiencing, which is true love, which is unconditional love, because she's experiencing the vibration. So it lit her up like an 8-day clock, because now she's experiencing the one. Okay? Which is the central point, which is the center point from which it all began. Okay? So you can't fool anybody with that. So she wasn't fooled by that. She was experiencing that. And the response, which is the feedback, was what I could see in her eyes, which were lit up like stars, because she was experiencing the energy that flows through me. She was experiencing through her art, and the feedback comes back by what I see in my mirror through her mirror. See? So in other words, she's not going to lose anything that she didn't already start with. Right? So where does the fear come in? Right? That's what's held in memory. Because the memory hasn't been cleared. So that is called a blockage, or if you will, electrical resistance. It's like a resistor on a motherboard. So that was what it was trying to do over time, is generate what? More resistors against capacitors on a motherboard. So the less capacitors that you have and the more resistors that you have on a motherboard, what happens? Dark star. You lose a mother. Spirit falls. That soul's gone out of that motherboard. Okay? That's why this was for all the marbles. Okay? So the amount of operations that had to take place as a result of, like, Asha, oh, you have no idea the level of technologies that these folks have. It's like a gazillion years beyond what you see on the ground. That's absolutely right. So it's like what I share with my clan mother. She actually has no idea. As a matter of fact, I happen to know this, and I've known this my whole life. The stuff that was put here and created here through this artificial intelligence, these folks actually have no idea of what can be used against them if it was so invoked. Okay? Because of what I know. And I wouldn't know that if I didn't have the capacity to be aware of that by knowing the company that I'm associated with. Okay? Because of the nature of my spirit and who I choose to serve, which is to serve forever, which means it's all yours. Okay? Which means I'm always in service to the all creation, because the energy that I run on is eternity. And when you're choosing to be eternity, which means you never want to lose the connection that you have from the source from which it all began, you're experiencing God consciousness, Godspeed seed, the seed from which it began. So when you join as one, become a monopole, that's the father arc and the mother arc, join as one, that's a powerful blast furnace. But I realize that not everybody experiences that. And I realize why they don't experience that. That's why I cried so much the entire time I was here. So anyway, when I post stuff like this is for, I share this with all creation. Every spirit right down to the smallest element to the biggest spirit there is. Right? It's the way it is. So I share that with the all creation because I experience what's true, because I'm what love is, and love is the absence of fear. So we don't live in fear of telling the truth. So I don't live in fear of expressing exactly what I feel through my heart and soul. And do it with maximum amount of love and joy and all the rest of it, right? But you know, when Patty did say she put the foot down, it's sometimes I remember when I grew up as a child, like Mama put the foot down, or Father put the foot down, or my dad would say, "We're not taking any more guff." So sometimes I feel when I say this, okay, that's like saying, "Please stop," okay? Please do not insult me, because that's really what it is. You're insulting the one, the law of one, which goes on forever. So if you're experiencing forever, then you know that it doesn't apply to you. That would be like saying that an eternal God consciousness is going to experience itself being assimilated by something that's phantom. I mean, you want to tell Gaia something like that? You want to tell Eve something like that? Right? You want to tell somebody like that who's with the Emerald Order Round Table? Somebody on the Syrian Council? Right? I mean, come on. So I try and do it in the most loving, peaceful, kind, generous way that I can. And yet there's some times when I see these things, it's and I'm not trying to tell people, and this is where you really do get careful in this, because it's like, if this is the reaction that I have to that, and then I post it, and then somebody else becomes aware of it, no matter who you are. But in this case, particularly Clan Mother, in some ways, I don't want her to experience what I'm experiencing, sharing with you here. Why? Because of how sensitive I am to how she might react to it. Because you don't want her to react in a negative way, do you? No. Well, then what am I doing? Hiding from the truth? Remember the sins of omission? Now we're back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I may be aware of this, but I don't want to share it with you because I already know what your reaction state is going to be because of how much resistance you're still experiencing throughout all your cellular memories that you've let clear because you haven't experienced a full phosphorus ignition. Okay? So I don't want to add any more electrons that now have to be converted, or if you will, the other way, which means if you're still holding on to electrons out of fear to experience giving them all away forever, to light yourself on fire, right? Then I don't want to do anything to add another electron that's negative reversal polarity current, right? Which means I don't want to add fuel to the fire, right? Right, you know. Instead, you want to be able to experience the ignition, right? I said that before too, huh? But it really is true, you know, that I don't allow my energy, my soul matrix, to be held captive by what others post. It's just like delete, 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 ignore, 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 ignore. Right? Because when we talk about application, or does it apply to me? Well, now we're into the API, aren't we? The Application Program Interface. I give consent to program that and allow that recording to be held as part of an application program interface with a Deadlight Phantom AI. No, no, no. That's why we issued all those statements about none of what I am they've never had any consent. Actually, my non-consent began before I ever even came in here and incarnated on this go-around. Right? I mentioned that before. I don't need a soul contract. Not when you're the source from which it all began. Okay? It means I serve forever. So I don't need a contract in order to know where I'm supposed to be anytime I'm experiencing a loss of light. That's called full restoration, which is reboot. Right? Reboot. You know what a reboot is? Recalibration, a reset. I'm going back to zero, baby. That's lighting yourself on fire because every time that you take a breath, breathe in and out, hey, what do you want to experience next? Circuits opening and closing. Hey, I want to experience this. I want to experience that. I'm alive. I'm a live wire. Right? So, you know, I mean, I can't speak for nobody else, but I know this. I have a lot more fun hanging out in the ocean and climbing and being with everything that's out there in the woods and nature than I do hanging out with technology through the way that this communication was set up because it was entirely weaponized against consciousness. So then you'd have to ask yourself, well, then why is anybody using it? Well, you know what a two-edged sword is, right? The X. Sign on the X. X-Men, Geek Squad. Remember, Geek, G. They really get everybody on the letters, including myself. I have to catch myself on this stuff all the time. Right? Because the English language, like that guy that put that reel up, talked about information consciousness held to the alphanumerical formatting codes. And you know what formatting is, right? In computer science, graphics like Adobe Photoshop, right? The codes, which are the mathematical codes that produce a pixelated screen that we thus experience using our consciousness to experience what's on that screen. Well, it's no different with a plasma screen. Computer-generated images, right? And so that's why I spent most of my life in nature, because it's like, wow, look at the canvas, right? Anyway, I think this is what we call just getting it out, releasing it all, right? Put it back into the morphogenetic field structure, right? Just express yourself. Don't be afraid to share what you feel, baby. Yeah, I don't mean no harm to nobody. Here it is. This is what I'm experiencing. Now I'm just going to let it go. Let it go. Let it be. No leashes, collars, and cages. It wants to attach itself by those that give consent to experience what they're choosing to consent, and that's called free will.